Come in!
Yeah, bro.
Coming,
mate, coming.
Fuck.
You look good, mate, you look good.
Yeah. Fuck me.
You okay?
You okay?
You're alive, you're alive.
You alright?
Can you get up, man? You're gonna have to get up.
Yeah, just let me get back there for a minute. Yep. Holy fuck. Oh. Jesus cock.
Amidst fast mounting Ukrainian defeats across multiple fronts, and particularly rapid attrition of the elite contingent sent into Russia's Kursk region in early August, consensus in the Western world has increasingly shifted towards a highly pessimistic outlook for the future of the joint war effort against Russia. German media DW had this to say in the interview with Marina Miron, a military analyst at Queen's College London, in a report published 5 days ago.
On the battlefield, Russia, we know, is gaining territory in Ukraine's east. We know that Ukraine is struggling to hold on to the summertime gains it made in Russia. You can say many things about what Ukraine is doing against Russia right now, but you cannot say that Ukraine is winning this war right now, can you?
It is unfortunate for Ukraine right now, especially since the Kursk incursion, which has led to even more losses on the Ukrainian side and to the acceleration of the operational tempo on the Russian side in the Donbass. And what we're seeing now is that Russia has taken Toretsk, has taken Vuhledar, and is probably going to take Pokrovsk, which is a strategic city for the Ukrainian forces. So no, Ukraine, not just with a shortage of ammunition and military equipment, but the problem is a shortage of manpower and capable manpower being able to operate Western weapon systems to fight on the battlefield. So no, Ukraine is definitely not winning in military terms. It is losing.
In particular, the advances of Russian forces into parts of the disputed areas of the Donbas region that are vital to the survival of what remains of Ukraine's economy have the potential to bring an end to efforts by the government of Kiev and its Western allies to sustain a NATO-aligned administration in power. The Ukrainian steel industry, for one, is seen to be particularly at risk due to Russian advances towards the city of Pokrovsk. While Ukraine in 2021 was ranked the 14th in the world in steel production, a legacy of the vast steel industry inherited from the Soviet era, the country fell to 24th place following the outbreak of the full-scale hostilities with Russia in 2022. As observed by the London-based Economist, Russia would soon be able to destroy the remaining steel industry of Ukraine, stressing that the full capture of Pokrovsk was not necessary to achieve this. In quotations, as they advance, they will try to cut off the power supply and block the main road that carries coal west to the remaining steel works. Ukraine already relies on Western aid to finance the large majority of government spending, ranging from pensions to power generation and arms acquisitions, with the collapse, one of its foremost remaining industries set to place considerable further pressure on its Western sponsors. The Wall Street Journal has observed that dwindling arms supplies for Western allies and vast inferiority in firepower are among the factors leaving Ukrainian forces prospects for holding out on the front lines looking rather grim. The journal also predicted that the coming winter could be especially difficult, with Ukrainian air defenses dwindling, leaving remaining power generation facilities vulnerable as temperatures rapidly drop. In fact, Ukrainian officials have revealed that 90% of the country's capacity for thermal power generation has already been destroyed by Russian attacks, according to the magazine. These undeniable facts are felt most acutely by the Ukrainians themselves, and even more so by their soldiers on the front line. The Daily Telegraph on the 20th of October reported on these sentiments when they interviewed a female drone commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Lieutenant Mikitenko, who said, quite frankly, that we are also sort of ready for negotiations, but we are just asking that the West insists on our interests. When asked if her expectations have changed since the beginning of the war, the lieutenant responded, in quotations, "I knew that the war would not end in a few weeks, and we would not be in Crimea in a few months, as our government used to say. I completely understood that, but I was hoping for much more help from the Western world." Former Commander-in-Chief, General Valery Zaluzny, put it this way in his interview: "If I lived in my house and was aware my neighbor took part of my garden, I would say we need to resolve this. If not now, then your sons will have to." The journalist described this response as a subtle but profound shift in the official rhetoric, which previously insisted on no peace until all of Ukraine was reclaimed. So with this wave of despair that has spread throughout the front line, even to Ukraine's most vigorous soldiers, the recent spate of frontline collapses that we have been reporting on seem self-explanatory. From the crumbling defenses in the Kursk bulge in the north, to the rapid advances of the Russians in the east in the Pokrovsk sector, and lastly, the difficulties faced by the defenders after the loss of Ugledar. These losses have taken a toll on morale to the extent that recent reports speak of mass desertion in the Ukrainian army. And while the exact figure varies depending on the source, some reports suggest that it is now to the tune of up to 80,000 troops so far. So today, in addition to what I have just mentioned, we will cover the recent updates on the hotspot areas of the front line, with a focus on the Kurakhove, Selydove, and Chasiv Yar offensives. But before I do, I ask that you consider supporting my work on this channel in one or all of the following three ways. First, make sure to watch all the ads. I try to place no more than 4 ads per video and give enough time in between so you do not feel inundated. Second, if you find those ads too annoying, consider joining my channel membership, where I publish exclusive videos that are not so much frontline reports, but give a more broader perspective on my views and analysis on geopolitics, on the strategies employed by the Russians and President Putin in this Ukraine war, as well as the geopolitical war between Russia, NATO, and the West. Lastly, I would appreciate if you donate via a super thanks or super chat during the premiere or at any point when you're watching this video. And I will leave links in the description of how you can donate via the super thanks or super chat and an access link to join my channel membership. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. In the past week, Russia has ramped up its offensive around Kurakhove, focusing its biggest mechanized force there. Breaking through this front could lead to advances in other areas, especially toward Pokrovsk. Ukrainian media reports that 55% of all fighting is taking place along the front line from Mirnograd to Ugledar. The Russians have identified this section as a priority for breaking through the Donetsk region and reaching the borders. Kurakhove currently holds a key position in their plan. Russia aims to achieve success here as quickly as possible and push as far west as they can, driving a wedge between Pokrovsk and Velika Novoselka in the south. However, this appears to be more of a winter prospect rather than something imminent. Throughout September and October, the Ukrainian Defense Forces executed a relatively successful withdrawal from the Novelsky pocket and for the most part avoided encirclement. It is therefore safe to say that the Novelsky pocket no longer exists, as it has been taken completely by the Russian forces. The new defense line is now limited to the Vovcha River to the east, the cities of Hernik and Kurakhivka, and the nearby villages of Zuryan and Alexandropol and Izmailivka. Situated on the higher ground and bounded by rivers and slag heaps, the Ukrainian army expects to be able to hold back Russian troops for a long time in an attempt to drain some of their offensive capabilities. For now, Russians have approached Ukrainian positions from all sides and are launching simultaneous attacks on Zuryan, have entered the northern districts of Hernik, are bypassing Izmailivka from the west, and are conducting frontal assaults near Alexandropol. However, Ukrainian media views that the Russians' main strategy is likely to bypass Ukrainian fortifications via Voznezhanka and moving south toward Kurakhove and cut off the supply line. How long the Ukrainian forces will be able to prevent Russian troops from organizing another semi-encirclement remains to be seen. Meanwhile, following the breakthrough in September, Russia managed to put pressure on Maximilianivka, not only from the east, but also from the north. After 2 weeks of fighting, as of the 23rd of October, Ukrainian media admits that the city is almost completely Russian, which permits the Russian forces to launch assaults directly on the outskirts of Kurakhove. But according to Turkish media, since last Thursday, that is the 17th of October, Russia had claimed the Maximilianivka had been captured, a town located about 5 miles east of Kurakhove, which housed a thermal power station.
Истории дивизии официально заявляем о взятии под наш контроль населенного пункта Максимilianovka. Враг будет разбит, победа будет за нами. Слава России!
In fact, the past few days have marked the beginning of the Battle of Kurakhove. Russian forces will likely continue frontal assaults from the east for some time, while awaiting for developments in the southern and northern directions to execute their favored tactic, encircling Kurakhove. The northern flank will obviously depend on Ukraine's ability to hold fortified positions in Hrynik and Kurakhivka, while the southern front is developing far more slowly. After occupying Ugledar, Russia is trying to break through to the Ukrainian defensive positions in Bohoyavlenka and Ukrainsk, as well as gradually attacking villages located along the Suki-Yali River, with the goal of eventually reaching the Kurakhove-Velika Novoselka highway. This week, Russians have almost completed the occupation of Konstantinivka and have begun attacking the eastern and southern outskirts of Katarinivka. From this location, the Russians may attempt to cross the river in order to advance along both of its banks. Further south, the Russians have advanced some 2.5 kilometers toward Bohoyavlenka, and from the east, from the direction of Voryan, by more than a kilometer. However, they still have more than 2.5 kilometers to reach the village, and the open steppe terrain, along with weather conditions, may slow their progress until the frost sets in. For over a month, Selydove has been the focal point of Russia's main offensive potential in the Pokrovsk direction. Despite Russia beginning to infiltrate the city from the east and north, Ukrainian defense forces still hold the line, claiming the destruction of significant portions of the Russian army. Having met resistance in their frontal assault, the Russians focus on attempts to bypass the city from the north and south, aiming to encircle Vishnivi. This week, the Russian progress on both fronts was not rapid. However, a significant portion of the eastern part of the city remains in a grey zone due to constant infiltration by Russian infantry and their efforts to entrench themselves in buildings. Julian Rapke, a German expert on the analysis of open data and a pro-Ukrainian journalist, viewed that the Ukrainian defenders will probably have to leave Selydove because of the increasing threat of encirclement, as reported in German media Bild. The analyst wrote, and I quote, "Bitter reality in Selydove. The Karadag Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces works well, protecting the city, but the neighboring parts do not cope. So the city will fall despite its brave defenders." This is exactly what I felt when I visited Karadag location in this area 4 weeks ago. Close quotations. By the 21st of October, Russian media TASS reported that all roads that lead from the city of Selydove are already under the fire control of the Russian armed forces, and that Ukrainian troops have no chance to safely leave the city. In fact, citing a Ukrainian soldier with the call sign Mukni, TASS reported that except for one unsafe route, all supply roads near Selydove are cut, and I quote, "This section of the front resembles the scenario of Russian troops taking control of Ugledar."
Доброго вечора, ми бабуїни.
On the Bakhmut front, there appears to be a dangerous breakthrough of Russian troops in Chasiv Yar. Similar to Ugledar, the fortress city of Chasiv Yar has been holding back the Russian troops for just over a year since the fall of Bakhmut. However, significant cracks appeared this week, such that if they cannot be quickly sealed, Ukrainian media admits that the results will be catastrophic and the front line will move toward Kramatorsk, Sloviansk and Konstantinovka, which is the last defensive belt in the Donetsk region. Initially, the Russian forces had 2 footholds on the right bank of the canal near Kalinivka and Ivaniski along the road to Konstantinovka. But within a few days, another breach occurred. Russia seized the eastern outskirts of the Zovnevi district. Currently, the most critical situation is a 1.5 kilometer advance of Russian forces along the Bakhmut-Konstantinivka highway. For now, the Ukrainians have a limited time window to cut off the breach. The coming weeks will show whether the Ukrainian General Staff can close these breaches and restore the front line along the Seversky Donets Donbas Canal, which comprises a concrete ditch about 30 meters wide and makes it difficult to cross the channel for heavy equipment, according to Ukrainian military analyst Sergei Gurets. Mr. Gretz further commented in an interview with Ukrainian media that there are three areas in which the Russian army is trying to pressure Ukrainian defenses in Chasiv Yar. The first direction is the Bodanivka and Kalinivka located to the north. The second is the central part and the access to the Novi district. And the third is the direction from Ivaniski through Sopocki with an advance toward Konstantinovka. An additional worrisome factor in this sector is the Russian creeping advance towards the heights near Klishivka. Last year, during the summer counteroffensive of Ukraine, Ukrainian armed forces recaptured these heights, which significantly eased the defense of Chasiv Yar. However, losing them could accelerate the city's fall. Lastly, in the Kursk region, it appears that the pace of the Russian offensive has slowed. Ukrainian forces managed to retreat from Ogovka and Lyubimovka, but are engaged in battles near Novo-Ivanivka and Zeleny Shayak, preventing a Russian breakthrough to Malaya Loknya. Ukrainians have also held the Russians back on the eastern front while withdrawing from some northern positions. At this stage, Ukraine's operation is fully shifted toward defense only. However, there is still no stable front line. In conclusion, Ukrainian media viewed that the intensity and multi-directional nature of the Russian offensive makes it seem as though they have unlimited resources. The final point of this report is to briefly discuss the growing desertion rate plaguing the Ukrainian army. Al Jazeera reported on the 21st of October that more Ukrainian soldiers have deserted the army this year than ever since the onset of this war. Prosecution for desertion from Ukraine's army is likely to hit at least 30,000 and quite possibly more for this year alone. The Kiev Post believed the number to be closer to 60,000, while Spanish newspaper El País puts the estimate at a whopping 80,000 desertions. The punishment for desertion is between 5 to 12 years in prison, but here's the kicker. Many of the defectors say that it is a better option than facing what might be an endless, undefined period on the battlefield. This was also reported on in the West by U.S. Senator Ron Paul in this clip.
So the last thing we want to talk about just briefly is kind of a follow-up, because yesterday we talked about the people in the Israeli army and how they're exhausted, they're depressed, they hate this war, it's a nightmare, they want it to be over. Well, the same is happening in the other war that the U.S. is fighting as a proxy, and that's the one in Ukraine. And thanks to Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute, we have this article today. About 51,000 Ukrainians have deserted armed forces this year. If you go to the next one, this is from the article. The Ukrainian prosecutor's office has opened 51,000 cases of desertion through the first 9 months of 2024. The number of soldiers abandoning their posts is likely to double last year's total. So after 2.5 years, almost 3 years, of the media lying to us and saying Ukraine is on the verge of winning, we see that people are voting with their feet and they're voting to get the heck out of there.
Yes, and it's a lot of them, and it's building, and I think that's a good sign. The exhaustion of war, exhaustion of boots on the ground, wear the boots and do the fighting, and the people who pay for it back at home, you know, they all have relatives, their family members die, they're gone, families are split up under these circumstances, and one individual said, "Well, I'm going to do it. I just think it's a little bit safer, you know, in prison than it is in the military."
Yeah. The reason for these decisions is simply this: low morale caused by exhaustion. One soldier under investigation for desertion named Serhi, who is also a journalist, told the Times newspaper of the UK as follows: "At least in prison, you know when you will be able to leave."